The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the private jet carrying me further away from everything I knew. $19 billion. That was the price of my descent, the sum my father valued more than my own voice. He thought exile, a lavish cage of his own making, would teach me a lesson. He thought stripping me of my phone, my access, my very connection to the world he controlled would crush my spirit. He was wrong. The rage was a slow burn, a simmering fire beneath the surface of my carefully constructed compliance. I would play the part of the obedient daughter, the contrite heiress, until the moment was right to unleash the storm. If you've ever felt betrayed by your own blood, subscribe now and join our family of survivors. You never know when your story will help someone else rise from the ashes. My name is Emily, and before I became a pariah, I was my father's confidant, his right hand in building the empire he so fiercely guarded. I had a seat at the table, a voice in the room, and foolishly I believed my opinions mattered. He built his empire on calculated risks and ruthless decisions, and I had always been there, offering a counterpoint, a voice of reason amidst the cutthroat world of high finance. I understood the intricacies of his business better than anyone, maybe even better than he did. That's why I knew the proposed contract with Omnicorp was a disaster waiting to happen. It was a house of cards built on speculation and inflated promises, and signing it would be like setting a match to his entire legacy. When I voiced my concerns, presenting irrefutable data and projections, I expected a debate, a discussion, at least a semblance of consideration. What I received instead was a cold, dismissive glare and a decree that I was out of line. He accused me of being emotional, of not understanding the big picture, the irony being that I saw the picture far more clearly than he did. He told me my place was not in the boardroom, questioning my abilities and my contributions. It was a slap in the face, a betrayal of everything I thought we had built together. That night, he signed the contract, sealing my fate and setting in motion the events that would eventually lead to his downfall. The grounding was a formality, a show of force meant to silence any further objections. My phone was taken, my access to company servers revoked, and I was essentially confined to the gilded prison of our family estate. Servants tiptoed around me, offering sympathetic glances and hushed whispers of support, but no one dared to openly defy my father's orders. He believed he had contained me, neutralized me, but he underestimated my resolve and, more importantly, my resources. Years ago, I had begun developing an AI, a passion project born out of my love for technology and my desire to create something truly innovative. It was a sophisticated program capable of analyzing vast amounts of data, identifying patterns, and predicting market trends with uncanny accuracy. I named it Nemesis, never imagining how apt that name would become. I had kept it hidden from my father, knowing he would dismiss it as a frivolous hobby, but now Nemesis was my lifeline, my weapon, my only hope of exposing the truth and saving his company from the brink. The person I trusted most, my father's longtime CFO and my supposed mentor, Sarah, was one of them. I discovered it accidentally, a stray comment overheard during a rare, unsupervised phone call with a family friend. Sarah, the woman who had guided me, championed my ideas, and feigned concern for my well-being, was secretly working against me, feeding my father's paranoia and downplaying my warnings about the Omnicorp deal. The realization hit me like a physical blow, shattering the last vestiges of trust I had held onto. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal, the deliberate undermining of my intelligence and my worth. It was then that I knew my revenge would not be about personal gain or petty retribution. It would be about justice, about exposing the truth, and about ensuring that no one, not even my own father, could silence me again. The days that followed were a blur of frustration and mounting despair. I tried reasoning with my father, sending carefully crafted emails outlining the flaws in the Omnicorp contract, the potential risks, and the inevitable financial fallout. Each message was met with silence, a digital wall erected between us, impenetrable and unforgiving. I even attempted to reach out to board members, trusted colleagues who I believed would see the logic in my arguments, but my access had been completely cut off. My calls went unanswered, my emails bounced back, and I realized the extent of my father's control. He had effectively erased me, isolating me from the world I had once inhabited. Sleepless nights became the norm, the weight of injustice pressing down on me, suffocating me with each passing hour. I would lie awake in the darkness, replaying the events leading up to my exile, searching for a way to undo the damage, to salvage what was left of my father's empire and my own reputation. The silence of the estate was a constant torment, amplifying my sense of isolation and fueling the burning rage within. I started using Nemesis around the clock, feeding it every piece of public information I could find on OmniCorp, searching for any sign of weakness, any hidden vulnerability that could expose their deception. The AI worked tirelessly, sifting through mountains of data, identifying patterns and anomalies that would have been invisible to the human eye. Slowly, painstakingly, a clearer picture began to emerge, a tapestry of lies and deceit woven together by greed and ambition. OmniCorp was not the financial powerhouse it claimed to be. It was a house of cards built on inflated assets and shady deals, and its CEO, Marcus Thorne, was a master manipulator, skilled at concealing the truth behind a facade of charm and success. I knew I had to expose him, to reveal the truth to my father and the world, but I was trapped, silenced, and seemingly powerless. My only weapon was Nemesis, and I knew I had to use it wisely if I had any hope of succeeding. I started documenting everything, every email, every conversation, every piece of evidence I could gather, storing it all securely within Nemesis's encrypted database. I knew that one day, this information would be my key to freedom, my means of exacting revenge on those who had wronged me. The act of collecting and preserving the information became my obsession, my sole purpose, filling the void left by my isolation and fueling my determination to fight back. It was during one of these late-night data dives that Nemesis flagged a series of unusual transactions linked to Sarah's personal bank account. Small amounts at first, almost insignificant, but then larger sums, transferred from shell corporations with ties to OmniCorp. The realization sent a jolt of icy anger through me. Sarah wasn't just undermining me, she was actively profiting from my downfall, betraying my trust for personal gain. It was a double blow, a betrayal on both a professional and a personal level, and it solidified my resolve to make them pay for what they had done. I focused my efforts on Sarah, digging deeper into her finances, her communications, her past, uncovering a web of deceit and corruption that extended far beyond the OmniCorp deal. She had been skimming money from the company for years, using her position as CFO to funnel funds into offshore accounts, all while pretending to be my loyal mentor and friend. The hypocrisy was staggering, and the thought of confronting her, of exposing her lies, filled me with a cold, calculating satisfaction. But I knew I couldn't act rashly. I had to gather all the evidence, build an airtight case, and choose the right moment to strike. My revenge had to be precise, devastating, and undeniable, leaving no room for doubt or escape. The news arrived like a physical blow, delivered not through official channels, but through the hushed whispers of the staff. My father had collapsed. The OmniCorp deal had imploded spectacularly, just as I had predicted, dragging his company, his legacy, and his health down with it. He was in the hospital, unresponsive, the doctors painting a grim picture of his chances of recovery. The irony was almost unbearable. He had ignored my warnings, dismissed my expertise, and now he was paying the ultimate price. And I, the daughter he had exiled, was left to watch his empire crumble from the sidelines, powerless to intervene. The weight of guilt pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Had I pushed too hard? Should I have found a way to communicate more effectively, to bridge the gap between us before it was too late? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and unanswerable, adding to the crushing sense of despair. I felt like I was drowning, trapped in a sea of regret and recrimination with no lifeline in sight. The days that followed were a torment. I paced the confines of my gilded cage, desperate for news, for any sign that my father was improving. The servants, their faces etched with worry, offered what little information they could glean from the outside world, but their updates were vague and often contradictory, leaving me more confused and anxious than before. I tried calling the hospital, but my calls were blocked, my name flagged as persona non grata. I was cut off, isolated, and utterly helpless. It was during one of these moments of utter despair that I found myself standing before a mirror, staring at my reflection. The face that stared back was gaunt, pale, and haunted by shadows. I barely recognized myself. Had I become the very thing I despised? Had my thirst for justice consumed me, turning me into a bitter, vengeful shell of my former self? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I couldn't continue down this path, allowing anger and resentment to consume me. I had to find a way to break free, to reclaim my life, and to make amends for the mistakes I had made. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would not let my father's actions define me. I would not let Sarah's betrayal break me. I would rise above the pettiness and the anger, and I would use my skills, my resources, and my intelligence to expose the truth and to bring those who had wronged me to justice. The rage didn't vanish, but it became something different. Cold, focused, a tool instead of a burden. The first step was to escape. My father had underestimated my determination, but he had also overestimated the effectiveness of his security measures. He had confined me to the estate, but he hadn't accounted for my knowledge of its hidden passages, its secret tunnels, and its forgotten exits. Years ago, during a particularly boring summer, I had explored every nook and cranny of the estate, mapping its layout in meticulous detail, driven by a childlike curiosity and a desire for adventure. Now that knowledge would be my key to freedom. Under the cover of darkness, I slipped out of my room, navigating the silent corridors with the stealth of a seasoned spy. I avoided the main entrances, opting instead for a concealed passage behind the library, a relic from a bygone era when the estate had served as a safe house for political dissidents. The passage led to a network of underground tunnels, damp and musty, but navigable with the aid of a flashlight I had salvaged from the maintenance shed. I moved quickly, silently, my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I knew that if I was caught, the consequences would be severe, but the thought of remaining trapped, powerless, was even more unbearable. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the end of the tunnel, emerging into a secluded part of the estate grounds, far from the prying eyes of the security cameras and the watchful gaze of the guards. I had arranged for a car to meet me at a predetermined location, a discreet rendezvous point near the edge of the property. The driver, a former employee who had remained loyal to me despite my father's attempts to discredit me, greeted me with a knowing smile and a reassuring nod. "Where to, Miss Emily?" he asked, his voice low and respectful. "To the truth," I replied, my voice firm and resolute. "And to justice." The drive to the city was a blur. I spent the time reviewing my plan, mentally rehearsing each step, anticipating every possible obstacle. I knew that what I was about to do was risky, potentially dangerous, but I was prepared to face the consequences, no matter how dire. I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. My father had taken away my freedom, my voice, and my reputation, but he had failed to extinguish the fire that burned within me, the unwavering determination to expose the truth and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As the city skyline came into view, I felt a surge of hope, a renewed sense of purpose. The game had changed. I was no longer a pawn in my father's game. I was the player, and I was about to rewrite the rules. That night, I found myself in a small, nondescript apartment, a safe house I had secured months earlier, anticipating the possibility of needing a place to disappear. The apartment was sparsely furnished, but it had everything I needed: a secure internet connection, a state-of-the-art computer, and most importantly, complete privacy. I activated Nemesis, and the AI sprang to life, its digital eyes scanning the room, assessing the security protocols, and preparing for the task ahead. I uploaded all the data I had collected, the emails, the financial records, the incriminating conversations, and instructed Nemesis to analyze it, to identify the key players, the hidden connections, and the most effective way to expose their crimes. The AI worked tirelessly, sifting through the information with lightning speed, uncovering a web of deceit and corruption that was even more extensive than I had imagined. Sarah wasn't just skimming money from the company. She was actively involved in a conspiracy to defraud investors, to manipulate the stock market, and to enrich herself and her co-conspirators at the expense of innocent people. And my father, blinded by his own ambition and his misplaced trust in Sarah, had been unwittingly complicit in her scheme. The realization filled me with a mixture of anger and sadness. My father, the man I had admired, the man I had strived to emulate, had been betrayed by someone he considered a trusted ally, and his legacy, his entire life's work, was now tarnished by her greed and her treachery. I knew I had to act quickly, to expose the truth before more damage could be done, before more people could be hurt. I instructed Nemesis to prepare a comprehensive report, outlining the details of Sarah's crimes, the evidence supporting the allegations, and the potential consequences of her actions. I also instructed the AI to identify the media outlets most likely to give the story the attention it deserved, the journalists with a proven track record of investigative reporting and a willingness to take on powerful interests. I knew that going public with this information was a gamble, that it could expose me to legal repercussions, even physical danger, but I was prepared to take the risk. The truth had to be told, and I was the only one who could tell it. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the blinds, I felt a surge of determination, a sense of purpose that had been absent for far too long. I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior, armed with the truth and ready to fight for justice. The time for silence was over. The time for revenge had begun. The first domino to fall was Sarah's carefully constructed image. Nemesis had identified several key journalists, but one stood out, a Pulitzer Prize winner known for her relentless pursuit of truth and her unwavering commitment to holding the powerful accountable. I crafted a carefully worded email, outlining the allegations against Sarah and providing a secure link to Nemesis's report. I made sure the email was untraceable, bouncing it through multiple servers and using encrypted communication channels to protect my identity. Within hours, I received a reply, a single word: intrigued. I knew I had her attention. Over the next few days, I fed her more information, providing her with irrefutable evidence of Sarah's crimes. I explained the intricacies of the financial transactions, the shell corporations, and the offshore accounts, guiding her through the complex web of deceit with meticulous detail. I even provided her with recordings of Sarah's conversations, captured by Nemesis through her compromised devices, revealing her callous disregard for the law and her willingness to betray anyone who stood in her way. The journalist was relentless, fact-checking every detail, verifying every source, and building an airtight case. She was a true professional, and I knew that once she published her story, there would be no turning back. As the journalist worked on the story, I focused my attention on OmniCorp, searching for other vulnerabilities, other weaknesses that could be exploited. Nemesis had identified several potential targets, including a corrupt executive who had been accepting bribes from contractors and a senior manager who had been falsifying safety reports to cut costs. I carefully documented their misconduct, gathering evidence that could be used to expose them and to further undermine OmniCorp's already fragile reputation. I knew that the more pressure I could apply, the more likely it was that the company would crumble, and the more likely it was that my father would finally see the truth. But I also knew that I had to be careful, that any misstep could expose me and jeopardize my entire plan. I operated in the shadows, using burner phones, encrypted email accounts, and anonymous proxies to conceal my identity. I was a ghost, a phantom, striking from the darkness and disappearing without a trace. The tension was almost unbearable. I knew that Sarah and her co-conspirators were closing in, that they were actively searching for the source of the leaks, and that they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. I had to be one step ahead of them, anticipating their every move and countering their every attack. I installed hidden cameras in Sarah's office, disguised as ordinary objects, to monitor her activities and to gather further evidence of her crimes. I tapped into her phone lines, listening to her conversations, learning her secrets, and anticipating her next move. I even hired a private investigator to follow her, to track her movements, and to identify her accomplices. I was obsessed, consumed by the need to expose her and to bring her to justice. I barely slept, barely ate, barely took care of myself. My entire existence revolved around my plan, my thirst for revenge. The walls seemed to be closing in. I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me, before they unmasked me, before they silenced me. But I was determined to finish what I had started, to expose the truth, and to make them pay for what they had done. I prepared for the worst, setting up escape routes, securing safe houses, and arming myself with the knowledge and the resources I would need to survive. I was ready to fight, to defend myself, and to protect the truth no matter the cost. The journalist called me late one night, her voice urgent and hushed. "I'm ready to publish," she said, "but I need your confirmation. Are you absolutely sure about this? There's no turning back." I hesitated for a moment, weighing the consequences of my actions. I knew that once the story was out, my life would never be the same. I would be exposed, vulnerable, and potentially in danger. But I also knew that I couldn't back down, that I had come too far to turn back now. "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "Publish it. Let the world see the truth." The story broke the next morning, sending shockwaves through the financial world. Sarah's crimes were exposed in excruciating detail, her lies laid bare for all to see. The stock market plunged, Omnicorp's shares plummeted, and my father's company teetered on the brink of collapse. Sarah was immediately suspended, and law enforcement agencies launched investigations into her conduct and the conduct of her co-conspirators. The news spread like wildfire, dominating the headlines and sparking outrage around the world. People were shocked, angry, and demanding justice. I watched the fallout from my safe house, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. My plan was working. The truth was out, and Sarah was finally paying for her crimes. But I knew that this was just the beginning. There were still more secrets to uncover, more lies to expose, and more people to hold accountable. I prepared for the next phase of my plan, anticipating the inevitable backlash and bracing myself for the storm that was about to come. Sarah, desperate to salvage her reputation and to avoid prosecution, retaliated swiftly and viciously. She leaked information about my past, twisting the truth and painting me as a vengeful, unstable woman who was motivated by personal animosity rather than a desire for justice. She accused me of hacking into her computers, stealing her emails, and fabricating evidence to frame her. She even claimed that I was mentally unstable, suggesting that my actions were the result of a psychological breakdown. Her lies were insidious, designed to discredit me and to undermine my credibility. But I was prepared for her attacks. I had anticipated her every move, and I had gathered evidence to refute her claims. I released my own statement, calmly and rationally addressing her allegations and presenting the facts as I knew them. I emphasized my commitment to justice and my determination to expose the truth, regardless of the personal cost. I also released further evidence of Sarah's crimes, including additional emails, financial records, and recordings that further implicated her and her co-conspirators. The public, initially swayed by Sarah's lies, quickly turned against her as the evidence mounted. Her reputation was in tatters, her career was ruined, and her legal troubles were only just beginning. The downfall of Sarah felt like a small victory, but it was a crucial step in my overall plan. It proved that I was capable of taking on powerful enemies and winning, and it sent a clear message to anyone who might consider crossing me. I was not to be underestimated, I was not to be silenced, and I would not rest until justice was served. The deeper I dug, the more I realized Sarah's greed wasn't a solo act. My own father was entangled, not as the mastermind, but as a puppet dancing to her tune. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. He had always been so careful, so meticulous in his business dealings. How could he have allowed himself to be manipulated so easily? Then it clicked. Sarah wasn't just exploiting Omnicorp's resources, she was exploiting my father's blind spot, his ambition and his desire to leave a legacy. She had played on his ego, whispering promises of even greater success, of solidifying his place in history while slowly bleeding the company dry. The evidence was buried deep within Omnicorp server logs, hidden behind layers of encryption and obfuscation, but Nemesis, bless its digital heart, had unearthed it all. There it was, a series of encrypted communications between my father and Sarah discussing offshore accounts, shell corporations, and suspicious financial transactions. My father's digital signature was all over it. I felt sick. The man I had idolized, the man I thought I knew, had been compromised. his integrity sacrificed at the altar of ambition. But I couldn't afford to wallow in my disappointment. I had a plan to execute, and time was running out. I needed to confront my father, to force him to acknowledge the truth and to take responsibility for his actions. But I couldn't just walk into his office and present him with the evidence. Sarah would be there, lurking in the shadows, ready to twist the narrative and to manipulate him further. I needed to create a situation where I could speak to him privately, where he would be forced to confront the consequences of his actions without Sarah's interference. I decided to use Omnicorp's annual charity gala as my stage. It was a high-profile event, attended by the city's elite, including my father, Sarah, and a host of other influential figures. It would be the perfect opportunity to expose Sarah's crimes to a wider audience and to force my father to choose between his loyalty to her and his responsibility to his company and his family. I knew it was a risky move, that it could backfire spectacularly, but I was willing to take the chance. I started by planting seeds of doubt within Omnicorp's inner circle, subtly leaking information about Sarah's misconduct to key executives and board members. I used anonymous emails, encrypted messages, and carefully placed rumors to sow discord and to create an atmosphere of suspicion. My goal was to undermine Sarah's authority and to create a sense of unease that would make her vulnerable. Then, I turned my attention to the gala itself. I used my connections to secure a coveted speaking slot, positioning myself as a champion of corporate ethics and transparency. I crafted a powerful speech, carefully worded to expose Sarah's crimes without explicitly nomming her, leaving enough breadcrumbs for the audience to connect the dots. I also arranged for Nemesis to project a series of incriminating documents and financial records onto a giant screen behind me as I spoke, visually illustrating the extent of Sarah's deceit. The final touch was a hidden microphone that I planned to wear during the event, capturing Sarah's reaction as her world crumbled around her. I knew she would try to deny the allegations, to deflect blame, and to discredit me, but I was prepared for her. I had anticipated her every move, and I had gathered enough evidence to counter her every argument. The stage was set. The players were in place. All that was left was to light the fuse. As the night of the gala approached, the tension became almost unbearable. I could feel Sarah closing in, her paranoia growing with each passing day. She had become increasingly suspicious of everyone around her, questioning their loyalty and scrutinizing their actions. I knew it was only a matter of time before she discovered my plan, before she realized that I was the one pulling the strings. But I was ready for her. I had anticipated her every move, and I had prepared a series of countermeasures to protect myself and to ensure the success of my plan. The day of the gala dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As I dressed for the event, I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and excitement. This was it, the moment of truth, the culmination of months of planning and preparation. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and stepped out into the night. I smiled, knowing they would never see it coming. The ballroom shimmered with false smiles and borrowed jewels. My father stood at the podium, introducing Sarah as the visionary behind Omnicorp's recent successes. My stomach churned. It was now or never. As I walked on stage, the room silenced. My father looked surprised, then annoyed. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of understanding dawning in their depths. I began my speech, praising Omnicorp's commitment to ethical practices, to transparency, to the well-being of its employees. I spoke of the importance of accountability, of holding those in power responsible for their actions. Then I paused, letting the words hang in the air. But what happens, I asked, my voice gaining steel, when that trust is broken? What happens when those in positions of power abuse their authority for personal gain? Behind me, Nemesis took over. The giant screen flickered to life, displaying a series of damning documents. Sarah's offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the encrypted communications between her and my father. A collective gasp swept through the room. My father's face drained of color. Sarah's carefully constructed facade began to crack. I continued, my voice rising in intensity. These documents reveal a pattern of deceit, of manipulation, of blatant disregard for the law. They show how one individual, driven by greed and ambition, has systematically looted this company, betraying the trust of its employees, its shareholders, and its community. I saw Sarah signaling frantically to someone off stage, but it was too late. The truth was out. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the hidden microphone. Perhaps, I said, turning to face Sarah directly, you'd like to explain yourself. Her composure shattered. She launched into a tirade, denying the allegations, accusing me of fabrication, of jealousy, of madness. But her words rang hollow, drowned out by the mounting evidence on the screen behind me. The microphone captured every word, every desperate attempt to deflect blame. The audience watched in stunned silence as Sarah's world imploded. Security guards approached, their faces grim. My father stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the screen, his expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. He finally saw it, he finally understood. Sarah was escorted from the ballroom, her protests echoing in the sudden silence. The police were waiting outside. The news spread like wildfire. Omnicorp's stock plummeted. Investigations were launched. My father, finally realizing the extent of Sarah's betrayal and his own complicity, resigned from his position, his reputation in ruins. He tried to reach out to me, to explain, to apologize, but I refused to speak to him. The damage was done. The trust was broken. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and corporate restructuring. Omnicorp was forced to pay hefty fines, and several executives were charged with financial misconduct. Sarah faced a long list of charges, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Her carefully constructed empire crumbled, leaving her penniless, disgraced, and facing a lengthy prison sentence. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of weary satisfaction settling over me. Justice had been served. The truth had been revealed. They lost everything. I just smiled. The weight on my shoulders lessened. The nightmares faded. The crimson stains seemed to diminish. Years later, I found myself standing at my father's graveside. He had lived long enough to see the company restored, but never recovered his name. He left a letter before he left this world, finally admitting his mistakes and acknowledging the truth. He apologized for his blindness, for his ambition, and for the pain he had caused me. He wrote that he was proud of my courage, my determination, and my unwavering commitment to justice. I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a shield against future darkness, a line drawn in the sand. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.